Pretty much everyone listening to this podcast has a couple people that they really look up to when it comes to a lot of different spaces that they're fascinated by, whether it be the world of real estate or business, relationships or spirituality or anything. So what is the key difference between the people that we all look up to and the people that don't really inspire us in the same capacity? Our guest today has interviewed hundreds of successful high performers and has come up with a couple of awesome discoveries. Most importantly, that their habits are the most important determining factor. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about today, the habits of successful high performers across a variety of sectors. In this episode, we're going to discuss why the habits are the actual maker or breaker of most people's success. We're going to discuss 3 habits that almost all successful people have. Some of these things are just habits that I think a lot of us probably intuitively anticipated, but there's at least one that I absolutely love that didn't really come naturally to you. I didn't really think about it in that context, but it makes so much sense. And by the way, I think a lot of listeners of this program are definitely the type of people that show this habit frequently. Also, is there a potential challenge to Malcolm Gladwell's theory of being an expert in something if you put in the 10,000 hours? From my perspective, there might be a hack that could get you there a lot more quickly. And I ask a question towards the end, which is there any behavior that you can identify in someone and say, that is a red flag, I need to remove them from my inner circle? And our guest instantly shot back a response that I really, really appreciated. Hey, listen, I have mentioned it on the podcast before, but our CFC mentorship program is still available. We have one course that's almost 100% full, and we're contemplating opening up a new one because there's been so much interest because of the book launch and the success of the book. So we're thinking about doing it. Usually we only do one per quarter. The calls are every other week, and we're contemplating doing it on the inverse every other week so that we can actually do 2 simultaneously, keeping that number minimized. So if you're interested in applying to the mentorship program, it is something that I'm very, very proud of. We have had so many students, I think upwards of somewhere between 50 and 100 that have just had really pronounced results. Every time I see them, they have just been so excited to share their success. You know, I go to these conferences and every year I see some of the same faces, and it's just so awesome to see people that went through the program. I saw them a year ago, and now we're at the same conference a year later, and they've got their brand established, they're raising money, they're closing deals, they're talking to amazing people that know them. And so I'm just really proud of everyone that's gone through it. So if you want to be like that, and you're a real estate entrepreneur or a passive investor who's really wants to focus some energy towards learning the world of passive investing, particularly as it relates to due diligence, or you're someone that really wants to create a real estate firm, there's no program like it. You know, there's a lot of courses out there, there's a lot of mentorship programs, there's a lot of boot camps, but there's a reason that you like to listen to the show. I'm sure that you and I probably think the show brings value in a way that others don't. And I agree with that, or else I would do it. It's the same with the mentorship program. Very proud of it. It's awesome. I'm happy to put my name on it. And if you're interested and sounds like it might be something that's a good fit for you, go to cfcmentorshipprogram.com. When you apply, you get a $200 discount that's active for 7 days. So if you're interested in doing it, go up there, hit the application button. Adam Carswell will reach out to you. He's the one that kind of administers it, and I hope to see you on the inside. All right, hope you enjoyed the episode. How's it going, everyone? Our guest for today is Michael Hyatt, who is the CEO and founder of Michael Hyatt and Company. He has scaled multiple companies over the years, including a $250 million publishing company with more than 700 employees and his own leadership development company that has grown more than 60% year over year for the past 4 years. This feat landed them in the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies in America list for 3 times in a row. And he's also the author of several New York Times bestsellers, including Platform, Living Forward, Your Best Year Ever, Free to Focus, and The Vision-Driven Leader. Michael, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks, Hunter. Glad to be on.
Hey, that short little bio does pack a punch, but I think that a lot of the listeners, many of them are probably familiar with your work. Some may not be. Tell us a bit about your background and how you started to realize that, there was something to be had in terms of the world of entrepreneurship education and how you wanted to play a role in that part of this business.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I spent most of my career in the world of book publishing. I just loved the world of books and influencing people with books. And so I worked in a variety of positions, including most recently my last position, as you pointed out, Chairman, CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishers, which at the time when I became the CEO in 2005 was the seventh largest book company in the US. We later sold in 2011 to HarperCollins. And then I used that as my exit to do what I'd wanted to do for a long time, which was to speak and write and really pursue the life of an entrepreneur. I love being an entrepreneur. And so most of my time these days is spent coaching entrepreneurs. We have a coaching program called Business Accelerator. We have about 500 high-end clients in that program. I meet face-to-face once a quarter in Nashville, where I live. And we just help them scale their business and just give you a little bit of the results. Our typical coaching client that comes in, our average coaching client, I should say, in the first 12 months, they'll grow their business 62% on average, and they'll shave 11 hours off their work week. So those are kind of the two things that we measure, in terms of how are you scaling your business and what's it doing to your lifestyle.
Wow, 11 hours is very hard to come by sometimes, especially when you are experiencing that rapid growth. So let's talk about some of the strategies that you use over there. What are some of the things that you've seen that have been really helpful in terms of allowing those entrepreneurs to unlock their time and increase their efficiency?
Well, I think this kind of goes back to the title of my new book, The Vision-Driven Leader. I think everything stands or falls on vision. The more clarity you have about the destination you're taking your company, your organization, the more likely you are and the faster you are to produce that in the world. So when I was at Thomas Nelson in the year 2000, I kind of got my first major management position. I became the general manager of one of Thomas Nelson's 14 book publishing divisions. And that division was dead last in terms of revenue growth. It was shrinking. It was dead last in terms of profit margin. It was the least profitable. In fact, it had lost money the previous year. And so the CEO asked me the question. He said, how long is it going to take you to turn this division around? Well, I didn't really have any idea, but I pulled a number out of the air and I said, I think it's going to take us 3 years. He said, that's reasonable. And he said, that's good. Go for it. So the first thing I did was I said, I got to get clearer about where this is going. So I went off and took kind of a private retreat, took a couple of days, and just started writing everything down that I wanted to see happen over the course of the next 3 years. And I wrote it in the present tense. And then I brought that back, not like, Moses coming back with the 10 Commandments, but just like a guy who had done some thinking about it and needed the input of my team to make it better. So I said to my management team, I said, this is kind of what I see in 3 years. What do you guys think? They got really jazzed up. And so we got very busy. And long story short, we were able to turn that division around, not in 3 years, but in a year and a half. We went from number 14 to number 1 in terms of revenue growth, number 14 to number 1 in profit margin. And that division stayed number 1 in the company until I left it in 2011. So over 11 years. So it's amazing. But that was the power of vision and the power of clarity.
Yes, and certainly the power of taking that time to actually get into that state of deep contemplation.
Yes.
Where those ideas can actually come to you. Because something that I've found is that without blocking out that time, trying to come up with a 3-year or a 5-year plan in intervals between your last call is basically impossible. So I want to hear about that. Like, how do you go about blocking out that time, and what has kind of been the ideal amount of time for you to come up with really the ability to see that clear vision into the future?
Yeah. So here's the thing that's I found to be true of entrepreneurs, investors, people that are out there making it happen, is they want to get in the game. They want to act. They know that action is the key to making stuff happen. You got to go out and kill something and bring it home to the cave. The problem is we need time to contemplate where we're going, because what we don't want to do is get faster to the wrong destination. And so to carve out that time, doesn't have to be a lot of time, but what I recommend, what I talk about in the book, is setting apart a day and getting alone with your thoughts and asking yourself the question, what do I want? That's where it starts. Most people don't have clarity about what they want. They might want to make more money. They may want to create a bigger company. They want to create more value in their company so that they can flip it at some point in the future. But to get really clear on what you want, and what we suggest is people generally think in terms of vision of a 3-year time horizon. If it's more than that, it's probably guesswork because the rate of change is so fast today. But if it's less than that, it's probably not strategic. but get alone with your thoughts and then start writing down those thoughts. And what we recommend is that you write them down in 4 key areas. So I'm not advocating what sometimes is referred to as a vision statement, which is generally thought of as, sort of a short, pithy, clever statement that you could slap on a coffee mug or put on a t-shirt. No, this is more robust than this, because this is something you're going to actually try to build, more like a blueprint. So we talk about getting real clear on your team, the future of your team. What kind of team do you want? If your dream doesn't require a team, your dream's not big enough. So a team is the vehicle by which you're going to realize or bring this vision into reality. So what do you want for the future of the team, including the work environment? What do you want for the future of the product? What is the product that you're actually selling? I don't care if you're in a service-based business or a product-based business. There's a product, and it's usually not the widget or the service that you're selling, but it's how people feel in terms of what they get through that product. Then to talk about the future of marketing, and then the future of your impact. So those 4 key areas. But the key thing, Hunter, is they've got to write it down. Thoughts disentangle themselves, passing over the lips and through pencil tips. Somebody a lot smarter than I said that, but it's true. There's something about writing that forces clarity. You don't have to be a writer, but just doing a brain dump and getting it on paper and then writing it in the present tense as though it were already happening. And this is just a hack from the world of brain science, because your brain can't differentiate between something that you vividly imagine or something you're actually experiencing. Your body experiences it, your inner world experiences it in the same way. This is why in all performance sports, a part of the coaching is typically mental rehearsal or pre-rehearsing how you're going to play. And I've got lots of examples in the book of that.
Man, that's excellent stuff. I think those 4 segments there, I know we could do at least 4 podcasts on each of those just to give people a taste of the team, product, the marketing, the impact. I think that's a great way to break it down, because especially when you think about the product, right? We as entrepreneurs sometimes get caught up in trying to say, I want to find the best possible product. It's about the product. It's all about the product. Optimize, which is 100% important. But from a marketing perspective, from attracting people to get buy-in to actually buy that product, it's all about what that product can make you feel like. And I like the way that you so if you can see the vision, you don't want to see only how great the product is. You want to see what impact it's going to have on people's lives. And that's especially how you get that buy-in from your team, which is what you mentioned earlier.
Totally. And the thing about it is, people are never buying the product. Like, I just recently bought a new BMW. I wasn't just buying a car. I mean, I love the technology. I've had several BMWs. I love those cars. I love the model, whatever. But really what I'm buying is the transformation or the way that it's making me feel as a result of buying that product. That's how I'm seeing myself when I'm, test driving the car. I'm imagining myself, what would it be like to be driving around in this car? How am I going to feel? All that stuff is happening kind of at a subliminal or a subconscious place. And in our vision, we can get really clear on that. What is the transformation that we're trying to create that people are ultimately buying?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, they're self-starters. They're people that they do have this natural inclination to want to build a better future for themselves. What about people that are contemplating making this switch? Let's say that they have been working at a job and they're starting to see that maybe their skills aren't being best used at that job. How can you suggest them or incite them to get a clear vision into what inspires them, to go from working 40 hours a week to potentially working much more as a startup, as an individual solopreneur in pursuit of something, more independent and more freedom oriented?
Well, here's the reality of startup businesses, and I've done several. The reality is the 1 million new businesses will be started this year in the United States. These are the U.S. Department of Commerce statistics. Of those 1 million businesses that start this year, 80% of those entrepreneurs will be out of business within the first 5 years. So that's going to leave us 20%. Of those 20%, 80% of those will go out of business in the next 5 years. So you basically, if you do the math on that, you've got a 4% chance of surviving 10 years. So the odds are against you. What gets you through the messy middle when stuff gets tough? Because everything looks exciting and easy on the front end, right? I don't care whether it's getting married, having kids, or starting a business. It looks easy on the front end until you get into what I call the messy middle, where it's really difficult, too much invested to quit, but you're not quite sure you have the resources to finish. The thing that gets you through is vision, because you've got to be bought into a bigger, better future that drives you to keep going when you want to quit. And that's the power of vision. And so I think on the front end, if you're thinking about starting a business, first of all, your vision doesn't have to be perfect. Your vision is going to evolve over time, but you got to at least start with destination in mind. If you don't do that, then basically any strategy will get you to where you're not quite sure where you want to go. But if you've got a clear vision, then all of a sudden the strategy can come into focus. And sometimes people get these reversed. Strategy, the how, only makes sense in view of the what, which is the vision. Once you get clear on the what it is you want, then you're in a position to choose a strategy, and a vision will attract resources like crazy. Whether you're going to try to build a business on borrowed money or with other investors, or you're just going to, bootstrap it yourself, which I like to do, a vision is a key component at the beginning of the process.
And that's a big part of what you talk about in the book. Now, I don't want to give all the secrets away, but I have to ask some of the questions that I know you want to address. In the book, you talk about 10 questions that entrepreneurs need to be able to answer to really focus their vision. I don't want to give all of it away, but just give me 2 that you really think that investors and entrepreneurs, I should say, should be focusing on that'll kind of clue them in to the types of content that's in the book.
Yeah, I would say, well, first of all, the first chapter is called, and this is the first question, are you a leader or a manager? And so I talk about the differences, which I can come back to here in a second, but let me give you the second question. And the second question is from the second part of the book, which is all about drafting what I call not a vision statement, but a vision script. This is that 4-part written thing that's going to guide the development of your company. So the fourth chapter, is it clear? I think that's a key and important thing, whether you're investing in a company, is the entrepreneur or the company you're investing in, do they have a clear vision or the future? Or is it vague and ambiguous, or is it just floating or rattling around in the CEO's mind and he hasn't really expressed it? I want clarity. If I'm going to invest, I want to know where we're going. And that's true too. If I'm going to bootstrap it, I'm investing my time, I'm investing my money. I want to be clear about the destination, because by now I know for sure it's going to take an enormous amount of work.
You mentioned, are you a leader or a manager? I wanted to give you the opportunity to expand on that because I think it's a really important distinction.
Yeah, it is an important distinction, Hunter. Both functions are important. You got to have leaders and you got to have managers. But unfortunately, there are a lot of companies out there that don't have leaders. Here's the difference. Leaders create vision while managers execute on that vision. Leaders inspire and motivate. Managers maintain and administer. Leaders take risks while managers control risks. Leaders stay focused on the horizon while managers have their eye on short-term goals and objectives. And again, vision is essential for leadership, but it's optional for managers. Sometimes when you're the CEO of a company, you have to perform both. But what I've discovered is that there are a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs who don't see themselves as visionary. Why not? Because first of all, vision isn't taught in business school. You usually or probably didn't have a good mentor that was visionary. Like I used to work for a guy in a very large company who said, I'm just not the visionary guy. I don't have that charisma. I don't have that expertise. So he appointed a committee and put me in charge of trying to figure out the company's vision. That didn't work so well. So this is not something you can delegate. It's not something you outsource. You can do it. But here's the thing, and this is what I try to do in the book. I've tried to make this so simple that it's almost paint by number. It's not charisma. It's not about special gifting. Anybody can create a vision with the right formula. And I've tried to make this almost like paint by number so that you can get in here and start doing it. And in this chapter, I talk about 2 examples for the world of politics. So first of all, there's US President John F. Kennedy. So you remember his whole moonshot speech, which he gave to a joint session of Congress, where he said, I believe that this nation should commit itself to landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. This was huge because we were in an arms race with the Soviet Union. Soviets got to space first. The US was scared to death that they were going to weaponize space, and we had to get on our game. And President Kennedy thought that if we could get a man to the moon and back, that would prove something to ourselves and to the Russians. And he unfortunately didn't get to see that fulfilled, but it was fulfilled within a decade. And by the way, when he articulated that vision, nobody understood the technology. There wasn't technology available. The math hadn't even been invented yet. There was all kinds of opposition, but we did it. And it was an amazing, amazing thing. On July the 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong emerged from Apollo 11, stepped on the moon. The rest is history. Now, contrast that with U.S. President George H.W. Bush. In 1987, he was running for office and knew he needed a way to connect with voters. So he asked one of his colleagues to identify some issues that would resonate with voters. So that colleague suggested that Bush get out to Camp David for a few days to figure out where he wanted to take the country. And so get this is like famous, but Bush responded kind of unimpressed by the idea. He said, "Oh, you mean the vision thing?" Rightly or wrongly, critics saw Bush as a yes man with little presence and power of his own. And he just didn't have a vision for the country. And ultimately, that's why I think he lost re-election. He just didn't know where he was going, where he was taking the country. And whatever an election is about, and this is apropos for where we're at right now, and as we're recording this, it's about the future of the country. You know, the best vision is going to win.
Man, that's really interesting. And I think that paints a clear picture because when it comes to getting that buy-in, the stories are what actually, it's the meat of the sandwich, right? And no disrespect to all the vegans out there. I know there's many of you listening, but metaphorically speaking, that's what actually people are interested in. That's how you have that. So if you have a team, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be a CEO, and you may even have a vision internally. But if you don't have the ability to communicate that with your team, you don't really have much of a team. That's when you have really high turnover. That's when you have people working inefficiently because they don't understand the big picture vision. Now, it's even worse if you yourself don't have that vision, because then there's no way for you to kind of complete that. So let's talk about kind of working through this. You mentioned drafting a script. Again, similar to the time blocks that take to actually come up with a vision, how do you structure a way to write that script out and then share that with your team?
Yeah, one of the things that I have in the book is a series of vision prompts so that if you're not quite sure where to start, and if the thought of staring at a computer screen or a blank sheet of paper kind of terrifies you, and it does most people that don't write for a living, and frankly, I write for a living, I've written 10 books, it still scares me. But the thing that that I've done in the book is create a series of vision prompts, which is a series of questions that if you did nothing but answer those questions, just get alone by yourself, take, a day to go through this process. And honestly, this process, getting started is going to take most of the day. But once you start writing, you're going to find that it's going to flow. But if you did nothing but answer these questions, you'd be about 90% of the way there. Then all you'd have to do is polish, refine it, get the input from your team, and you'd have a vision script that could absolutely change the trajectory of your business, would give you something that you could share, not only if you've got a board of investors or if you've got a boss, but you could also share it with your employees. You can share it with outside constituents like your customers or your clients or the banks or whoever's going to be investing in your enterprise. But a vision is so powerful. People like to invest in clarity. They like to invest in something that's going somewhere. And if you know where that is, you're going to attract resources to you. So again, I'm just trying to make it simple by including these vision prompts. Another thing too is that if people buy the book between now and April the 4th, we've got a whole raft of bonuses, and I can get into this later if you want. But one of them is an online tool called the Vision Scripter Tool. And that has additional resources inside of it, and it's free. All you have to do is buy the book, and you get all these like $600 worth of bonuses free. But people can find that at thevisiondrivenleader.com/cashflow. And it's a page we created for your listeners specifically so they can get this Vision Scripter tool, which will walk them through the process.
Hey, that's great. And no problem. We'll definitely link to that in the show notes page. As I'm hearing this, I have a very analytical brain. This is why investments intrigue me. But I also like to contemplate about the future. When I really started getting into this framework and line of thinking, I found myself kind of oscillating between okay, here's my 3-year goal. That sounds amazing. But then instantly saying, okay, here's all the reasons why that's not going to happen. Here's all the reasons why it's going to be super challenging. Here's all the reasons that I don't have the resources that would be required for me to get there. How do you go about turning that off during these sessions?
Yeah, well, first of all, if that happens to you, you're normal. This is like a self-protective, self-preservation mechanism to keep you from getting in over your head. But the truth is, if your vision is going to be compelling, if it's going to have a chance of being accomplished, it's just like goal setting. And I said this in my goal setting book, Your Best Year Ever. Your vision's got to be in the discomfort zone. So like if you put it in the comfort zone, if it's just going to be kind of incremental and you know exactly how to accomplish it, and it's going to be a slight improvement over this last year, the problem is that's not going to ignite your imagination. It's not going to compel your best action. It's not going to enroll your team in it. It's just not compelling enough. Your vision, like goals, need to be in the discomfort zone. And the discomfort zone, the reason we call it the discomfort zone, this is a newsflash, is because it's uncomfortable. You're going to feel fear. You're going to feel uncertainty. You're going to feel doubt. You're going to be afraid that you may fail if you try this. You're going to feel uncertain about the path or the strategy to get you to that destination. And you're going to feel a whole lot of doubt. And mostly that shows up as self-doubt. Do I really have what it takes to pull off this vision? If your vision is there, if it's making you feel uncomfortable, congratulations. Those three emotional responses, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, are like three markers that you're in the discomfort zone. Now, you don't want to be in the delusional zone. That's like zone 3. You don't want to be in the delusional zone, but you do want to be in the discomfort zone. So what you have to be willing to do, Hunter, is in the moment when you have clarity about the vision and those doubts begin to surface and you begin to think, well, I don't know how I would do this. You've got to reframe that and say, of course, I don't know how to do it. It's in my discomfort zone, and that's okay. But here's the key. You've got to suspend disbelief and stay focused on the vision. The first and most important task is to get clear on the vision. Flesh it out. And again, I go through these prompts in the book. Flesh it out so that it's a vision script. The how is going to be important. I'm not saying that, this is not like that book, The Secret, that was released about 20 years ago about the law of attraction.
Right.
That you just kind of get clear on the vision,
right,
and then you can sit down and wait for it to happen.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. But it is the first step. You got to get clear on the what. Then it's time to ask the question about the how. And initially, you won't see the path. Usually you can see the first few steps you need to take, and that's really all you need because the path is going to unfold over time. If you're clear about the destination, the path can come later, and you got to just suspend that entire internal conversation till you get clarity on the vision. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. What do you suggest? Okay, so let's say you go through this strategy, you start to feel a little bit like it's almost achievable. And then as you start to contemplate it deeper, you start to realize, okay, wait, this is. And you start to familiarize yourself with it and it starts to become something that you can see into your own future. Then it's time to share it with the team. What if, after all of that contemplation, all of that reverse engineering, you have a clear roadmap to that 3-year plan, you deliver it to the team and the response is not positive? What do you do from there? What's kind of how do you tell whether it's the wrong team or if you delivered it incorrectly, or what's the next step there?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would go through the criteria I list in part 2 of the book. I would say, first of all, is it clear? That's like, the first hurdle you got to pass. Number 2, and by the way, there's more than just answering the question yes or no. There's a whole thing. Sure. I talk about the difference between abstract and concrete and implicit and explicit. So is it clear? Secondly, does it inspire? First of all, does it inspire you? If you're not excited about the vision, then you're not going to get anybody else excited. The hardest person to sell is you. You can't sell what you haven't bought. So I talk about this, and I talk about some criteria for, is it inspirational? And I talk about 4 characteristics of an inspiring vision in that chapter. Then I talk about, is it practical? In other words, is this going to inform, are you going to be able to create the linkage between the vision and your daily action so that you can execute against it? To make something happen in the world, you got to have vision, you got to have alignment around that vision, and then you got to have execution. And so the right vision will be practical enough that it'll inform or create the alignment, and it'll inform the execution and lead to the execution. And then finally, can you sell it? So before you ever go to your team, you want to go through that process of asking yourself those 4 questions. Is it clear? Does it inspire? Is it practical? Can you sell it? Now, that doesn't guarantee that the team is going to be enthusiastic, but it's going to get you a long way down the road toward getting their buy-in if you can answer those 4 questions in the affirmative. Then you got to walk into the meeting and you got to say, hey guys, look, I've got kind of this vision document. It's wet cement. I need your input to make it better. So what you're not trying to do is sell them something and avoid all resistance. You want some pushback because your teammates, if they're any good, will see things that you don't see. They'll notice things that you forgot or omitted. They'll make it better. Ultimately, this has got to be collective vision that people have buy-in to. Now, what I don't do is recommend, and it depends on the size of your organization, that you go in and just like share it with the entire company initially. You got to practice what I call in the book cascading communication. So start with your leadership team, whatever your inner circle is. Start with them. Get alignment there first. Once you have alignment there, and they're going to fine tune it, they're going to push back. You're going to refine it and redraft it and edit it. Then you're going to go to the next level out. Maybe you have another level of managers that you want to go to. And then ultimately everybody. You don't want anybody surprised at that big meeting who has any management or leadership responsibility. You want them aligned so that when the people on the front line say, I'm not sure I get that. You want the people that are in the leadership chain of command to say, oh, we're totally aligned on this. We see it. We're aligned on this. So that's how I would roll it out. If you get some people that just, say, I don't get it, that's okay. Because here's the beautiful thing about a vision. It's a filter. And it's a filter in at least two ways that are significant. First of all, it's a filter for opportunities. Do you know the biggest thing that derails companies that experience some level of success is opportunity? Opportunities start coming to you, and before long, if you're not careful, you get unfocused, and you start getting into opportunities you have no business getting into. This happened to the first publishing company I started back in the late 80s. We didn't have a vision script, and so we started accepting all these opportunities when we started experiencing success. And so we weren't just publishing adult trade books, which is why we got into business. We started doing children's books and gift books and one thing after another. Pretty soon our resources were spread too thin. We were in areas of business that we didn't have quite as much expertise, and we ultimately failed. That business went belly up. So a vision provides a filter by which you can evaluate opportunities, because distractions often show up masquerading as opportunities. And they'll pull you off course, they'll deplete your resources, and they'll contribute to your failure. But there's another one, and this goes back to what you ask about, and that is the vision can be a filter for which teammates to attract and which ones to repel. So if people that you're considering hiring don't sign on because the vision doesn't resonate, that's okay. There's another assignment for them. There's someplace else they need to be, but not with your company. You want a vision that's so compelling it attracts the right people, repels the wrong people, and even people that are on board, there's probably some filtering that needs to happen internally as well.
Excellent. And it's actually a really good transition to this second part of this interview that I've really been looking forward to. But I'll tell you what, it's amazing how as you start to increase the value that you bring to the marketplace, the request that you start to get increases, I would say disproportionately, right? So it's like if you start to bring twice as much value to the marketplace, you start to get 4 more, 10 more requests, and you start to realize yourself saying no much more than you used to. And this is something that now my executive assistant has, which is, an autoresponder saying, look, unfortunately, due to the amount of requests Hunter receives, his goal for 2020 is to reduce the amount of commitments he has as opposed to increase them. And so unfortunately, we'll have to follow up with you if we're interested in this. But it's basically saying no in a really polite way. That is something that is an interesting transition to make. It's exciting, but for someone who is so eager to please everyone, you really have to realize that, like Warren Buffett says, the difference between a successful person and an ultra successful person is that an ultra successful person says no to almost everything.
That's right.
And that is pretty much the main thing here. So let's transition, because I think it's an important topic to bring up. You wrote a book, which as an investor, I'm always looking for things on a risk-adjusted basis. I think buying this book, I will give it a 100% pitch live on the podcast. Your World-Class Assistant is a total no-brainer in terms of the investment and the time and energy versus the potential upside. So stop what you're doing right now after this interview, of course. Check it out. It is awesome. We'll link to that in the show notes page. Michael, you have built an entire team of executive assistants and then an awesome structure for optimizing their use. Let's talk first about what the role of an effective executive assistant is and some of the ways that you have structured your team to optimize their role in your company.
Yeah, so that book, Your World-Class Assistant, is all about how to maximize the use of an executive assistant, how you can get your life back, how you can get more and more focused on the things that you're both passionate about and proficient at. And those are the things that are going to create the most leverage for your business and drive it forward and enable you to scale. I talk to so many entrepreneurs that they actually don't want to scale. And they may not be willing to admit that out loud, but they think to themselves, I'm working 70 hours a week now, maybe 80 hours a week. The only way I know to get more done is to work more hours and I'm out of time. Well, an executive assistant ought to be every entrepreneur's first hire it's your most important team member, because what it does is it enables you. It's the closest thing that you can come to cloning. And so when you got the right executive assistant, this is like a partner, so that you can stay focused on the things that I call in my book, Free to Focus, your desire zone activities where you're passionate and you're proficient. So my executive assistant, Jim, is phenomenal. He loves to do the things I hate. Like, I don't enjoy managing my calendar. I don't like booking travel. I don't like handling email. And all that stuff is in what I call my drudgery zone, where I'm just bored. It feels like a grind. I hate it. Jim, on the other hand, because, God makes everybody different, Jim loves that stuff. And so we're a great team together. What that does is that frees me up to do the things that generate revenue that move my business forward. So, quick story. Back in 2011, when I started this business, I started as a solopreneur. Very quickly, I began to get overrun with opportunities, but I was trying to do everything. I had to find the FedEx box to get anything shipped. I had to invoice my clients so I could get paid. I had to follow up on payments that I wasn't getting. I was doing the accounting. I was booking my travel. All this stuff was keeping me from doing the thing that I was really best at, which was, in my business, creating content, delivering content, getting out there speaking. So the first thing I did was I hired an executive assistant. I didn't hire a full-time person. I honestly, at that point, I thought, I just don't want to take on, the overhead for that. But what if I could hire somebody 5 hours a week? And that's what I did. I went to a company called Belay Solutions. You can link to that in show notes if you want, but they're a company I still recommend, although I don't have a vested interest. I just love what they do. But they provide essentially fractional executive assistants. So I got one for 5 hours a week. Oh my gosh, the difference that made. Now all of a sudden, I had somebody who is much more skilled at all the things I wasn't. So they could do it in a fraction of the time. And it freed me up to go out there and pursue more opportunity, to be able to drive my fees up and to make more money. After about 2 weeks at 5 hours a week, I said, let's take this to 10 hours a week. And then I went to 20 hours a week. And then I went to, a full-time person. And then I went to 2 full-time executive assistants, because every time I hired somebody or increased their hours, my income went up, because I was more and more focused on that zone where I can really drive the results.
Yeah, well, first of all, knowing those zones are very important. But then once you do compartmentalize what skills you should be focusing on, it's easy to start with that drudgery zone and get those things off your list completely, if not significantly mitigate them. Email is one of those things that comes up frequently in this conversation, especially in the investor world. It can be very challenging to relinquish control of your email accounts. How do you create systems that can effectively outsource emails so that an executive assistant can start to respond and then start to, either forward to their account based on, the severity or the significance of the types of responses that are expected? How do you systematize that process of outsourcing emails?
Okay, let me give you the system, but I want to first sort of attack or discuss the limiting beliefs that keep people from doing this. So there's one of 3 reasons that most entrepreneurs will not delegate, apropos to email as well. So first of all, they have rattling around this sentence in their head that says, if I want it done right, I have to do it myself. It's like limiting belief. Nobody ever expresses it quite like that, but it's a belief that a lot of entrepreneurs have. The second one they have is, it takes longer to explain how to do it. I might as well do it myself. And the third one is, I can't really afford to hire somebody else right now. I guess I'm going to have to do it myself. As long as the pronoun myself is at the end of those sentences, you're going to stay stuck. Your business has stopped growing, has stopped scaling. Now, let me confront these one at a time. First of all, yeah, if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. But what if there are people out there that could do those tasks that you don't want to do anyway, actually better than you could do it? That's the promise of hiring the right executive assistant. I can promise you today, I've got a company full of people that do what they do way better than I could ever think about doing it. There are those people out there. You've got to have a hiring process, which I detail in the book, of how to find those people and make sure they're the right people. That second one, it takes longer to explain how to do something. I might as well do it myself. Well, it does take longer the first time. You've got to train people. People cannot read your mind. I don't care how good they are. Your wife or your husband can't read your mind. Your business partner can't read your mind. Your employees can't read your mind. You've got to be explicit and you got to be clear in terms of your expectations. And in terms of the money, does it really make sense for somebody that can make $100 or $200 or $500 an hour to be doing a task that you hire for $20 an hour? No, that's just bad math. So having said that, here's the system. I recommend that entrepreneurs have 2 email addresses. One is going to be like an uber private, sort of secret one that only your executive assistant, your family, and maybe a couple of close associates in your business have. Okay, that's going to be the email address or account that you're going to monitor. The public email address, the one that you have on your business card, the one that you give out when people ask, that's going to be what I call your public email address. And so this is the one you're going to give to everybody else, but this is the one that your executive assistant is actually going to monitor. Now you think, well, wait a second. How are they going to respond? How will they know how to respond? Well, that's the training process. So for the first several times they through the inbox, I'm going to be going through it and having them look over my shoulder. I'm going to have them go through it and I'm going to be looking over their shoulder. But here's the beauty of it, Hunter. We recommend and encourage people to compile a group of email templates so that you can answer the most common inquiries, questions that come into your inbox. I realized this probably 20 years ago that most of the requests I get recurred over and over again. And I think I isolated about 42 different requests that I get. And every time I would write a response, I would say, if I had more time, how would I want to respond to this in a way that was thoughtful, in a way that was generous, in a way that got people what they needed, but I could do it in an instant? Well, email templates are the key to this. And you can do them actually as email signatures, because the signature doesn't just have to be your address and phone number. It can be an entire page worth of content, but you can save that as an email signature. You can grab it when somebody asks that question, personalize it a little bit. And by the way, my executive assistant, when he's doing this, he always responds as himself. And he'll say something like this. He'll say, hey, Michael's tied up right now. He asked me to respond to this. And people love a quick response. They'd rather have a quick response and get what they need from somebody rather than wait for me, which may be a few days.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how we manage email. And it's phenomenal. I went personally from over 100 email messages a day to now I have about 4 to 6 emails that require my personal touch.
Wow, 4 is that's a pretty remarkable accomplishment. We use a app called Mixmax for our templates, and this is a long process. Just to clarify, I get a lot of technical, extremely detail-oriented emails, which I have found I will need to respond to, and that's just the specificity of what's required there is just that's where we're currently at. However, a lot can be outsourced, especially when it comes to things like responding to calendar requests,
yes,
where if you have your assistant already has full access to your calendar, they can do that. Another tool that I think is just so impactful, especially when it comes to explaining your thinking, is screen recording.
Yes.
So if you typically get the same types of emails on a daily basis. So if you record yourself doing a 30-minute email response session each day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and talking through your thought process on how you're going through those particular emails, at the end of the 3 days, you have a very solid framework and foundation to share with your EA. And the results that you may get from that are pretty compelling. Like I said, you're going to be responding to those emails anyway. So the argument that it's going to take too much time to explain is not really there. It's just a matter of recording what you're already doing.
Yeah. And then once you've delegated it, then it's off your plate forever. And one of the things I should say also about the calendar is Jim has the authority to put anything on my calendar. Some stuff he will check with me. You know, we've been working together now for 5 years. Mm-hmm. So he pretty much knows what's going to work and what's not going to work. But it's so much so that I don't put anything on my calendar without checking with Jim. It all has to go through Jim. That way we have one person doing air traffic control. I don't end up double booked. Jim takes the full context into view because it's hard. I'm a recovering people pleaser. It's hard for me to say no. But the fact that I've got Jim, like when somebody makes a request on my calendar through email or in person, I could just say, hey, that sounds like a great idea. I'm not sure if I've got the time available, but let me connect you with Jim and Jim will respond to you. Just putting that pause between, the request and the answer is hugely helpful for giving us both an opportunity to evaluate it and see if it's something we want to do.
Yes, completely agree. And by the way, people will make mistakes. But the goal is to empower them to make those mistakes so that you can correct them and then continue on. It's a beautiful process to watch someone really grow as an employee. But in order to do that, you have to give them the freedom to do those things. And sometimes that means making little errors along the way. And it's really inspiring, as an entrepreneur and as someone who works for entrepreneurs to put yourself in that position. So I know we're running short on time, and I have a couple last questions I wanted to mention.
Okay.
You've been able to help a ton of clients over the years. You've been able to help them save money, make money, get more freedom in their life, do some pretty impressive things. From your own perspective, watching them have that success, watching your clients experience that success, what has been a real significant realization that you've seen be a reoccurring theme that clients have come to realize and then kind of launched off into another stratosphere in terms of their personal freedom and income?
Well, I think when they can get this, what I'm about to say, this statement clear, the question is, how can I achieve more by doing less? And what is taught today by most entrepreneurs is something I call the hustle fallacy. If you want to make something happen, if you want to scale your business, if you want to get wealthy, you got to hustle more. You got to be willing to give up your evenings. You got to be willing to give up your weekends. I say BS. It's actually the opposite. Because here's what happens. If you say to yourself, for example, and this is when everything began to shift for me, and it's when everything begins to shift for my 500 business coaching clients, I say, I want you to put hard boundaries around your work. Now, you can't always do this in real estate, okay? I know it's a different world. But for most of the guys I'm working with, I'm saying, look, decide you're going to quit at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and you're not going to touch your computer or work in the evenings. Decide you're not going to work in the weekends. Decide you're not going to do any more fake-cations, but you're going to actually do vacations where you don't work. Here's what happens. A couple things happen. First of all, you make better decisions during the day. In the old world, when I would work in the evenings and the weekends, I'd say, if I don't get that work done today, I can do it tonight. Or I can do it on this weekend. And the problem is, you're only good. The science proves this. I wrote all about this in my book, Free to Focus. You're only good for about 40 to 45 hours a week. After that, your productivity begins to go backwards. You make more mistakes. You're less focused. You actually achieve less. But when you give rejuvenation a priority so that you're sleeping well, so that you're taking care of yourself physically, in terms of exercise and eating better, that's what's going to make you more productive, more focused, and actually be able to scale. I think those constraints are the key to freedom and the key to scale, but it's counterintuitive. How can you achieve more by doing less? That's the operative question.
I really like that. It's interesting because when you look on Instagram, you'll see a lot of people pitching the hustle mentality.
Yes.
And I think there is some validity to it depending on where you are in your curve, right? So like the people that most get their guidance from Instagram, let's say, they're trying to get started. And when you get started, you may be looking at your calendar and you're like, dude, I don't need an executive assistant to manage my calendar. I got nothing on my calendar. My goal is to fill this calendar up. But then much more quickly than most entrepreneurs realize, the moment that you have some traction, the goal should be efficiency. And that's why so many successful people are always harping on it. Like Tim Ferriss always says, I can always make more money. I can always make more money. The one thing you have to push to make the more money, just try a little bit harder, increase the work effort, et cetera. Take vacations and work during them, et cetera. But to actually get your business to the next level, it's all about creating systems and processes that will allow you to build an infrastructure to make quantum leaps, not make the difference between working 40 hours a week and 43 hours a week, for example. You agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Absolutely. Yep.
Tell us one of your favorite client stories that went from someone who was really struggling to someone that took off like a rocket ship.
Okay. So I've got a client just outside of Atlanta who's a business coaching client in our Business Accelerator program. And he was in the printing business. His business had never grown more than 3% year over year for 20 years. Now, the printing business is kind of a notoriously low margin, difficult business. The first year after he came into our program, his business grew by 20%. He's on pace this year to grow by 40%. And he's working less than he ever worked before in his life. He's taking more vacation time. He's got more time for his family. His wife wrote me a thank you note, because she feels like she got her husband back. But again, that's kind of the illustration of the power of constraint. But that sounds like enormous growth, but you'd be surprised when you just focus on it and get clear on the vision thing. And that's really where it happened for him, is he got clear in the first time he came to Nashville and met with me. We got really clear on the vision, what he wanted, and that's what he didn't have before.
Very cool. Michael, can't thank you enough. Before we jump off, let the listeners know how they can learn more about you and your books. We'll link to all those in the show notes page.
Yeah. Okay. So at Michael Hyatt, Hyatt, Hyatt.com, you can find everything related to me, including my weekly podcast called Lead to Win. For the Vision Driven Leader, which is coming out on March the 31st, I don't know when this is going to post, but you can go to visiondrivenleader.com/cashflow. And we've got a selection of bonuses there worth over $600. All you have to do is buy the book from wherever, bring your receipt back to that URL, write in the receipt number, and we'll give you access to those bonuses, including the audio book. If you'd rather listen to it in audio, it's me actually reading the book. And then I've also got the ebook of my last book, Free to Focus for You, whole bunch of things, some videos, other things related to creating your vision. So those would be the two places. If you want to get the book on executive assistance, that's called Your World Class Assistant, and you can find that at yourworldclassassistant.com. It's not available on Amazon. That's a self-published book that we only sell through our site at yourworldclassassistant.com.
Excellent. Michael, thanks so much.
Thanks, Hunter.
All right, listeners, thanks for checking out the episode. As always, the contact information for our guest will be available in the show notes page, which is hosted on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher. Don't forget, if you want access to some of the free goodies that I'm talking about at the beginning of these episodes, like free ebooks, weekly investor emails, and articles about some of the most important investment-related topics, make sure that you have created an account with CFC because this stuff is automatically available. You can do this by going to cashflowconnections.com and signing up as an accredited investor. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at hunterthompson@cashflowconnections.com. Thanks again.